Welcome, everyone, to Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from BikeFans.com, and as always, I'm joined by the NFL answer man, game day radio color analyst for the Minnesota Vikings Radio Network, Pete Bercich. Pete, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I got to be doing better than you because I happened to tune into the radio on a drive home on Saturday, and knowing you're a Notre Dame alum, how'd you handle that Florida State loss this past weekend?
Well, I mean, we got robbed. We got jobbed by every stretch of the imagination, and I think the rest of the country and the rest of the viewing public sees it the exact same way as I do.
So you can live with it knowing that you got cheated and everybody knows it.
Yeah. That's what happened. I mean, it's obvious. I think everybody, like I said, feels the exact same way about that play that I do, and the rest of the Notre Dame faithful.
No, I hear you. Well, as we turn over to the NFL playing field, the Vikings did make some positive strides last week against the Bills, but then they lost that heartbreaker literally in the last second. And some fans are saying the defense collapsed, and they're saying, it's really the same old story for this Viking defense. But I don't necessarily think that's true. What do you say about the progress of this defense in Minnesota?
Well, I don't think it's anywhere near last year. I don't think it's even in the same time zone. The end result was the same, meaning that a couple big breakdowns toward the end of the game, on a final drive resulted in a loss, and then we saw that happen, I think, 4 or 5 times last year. Defensively, though, as a group, I think they played very, very well. They had to overcome a number of turnovers on offense, and they did, and they got those turnovers when Buffalo was, approaching the red zone, no less. So they came at very, very opportune times. I just don't see this group, this team, this defense performing like they did last year. I mean, there were teams that just shredded us up and down the field, and you look at how the Vikings ended up. At least defense ended up. 17 points against another NFL team is pretty good. The offense didn't do a whole lot as far as putting points on the board to help them out, but I think everybody in their gut knows that defensively, this group is playing better right now. They're doing a lot of good things, and you just had a couple breakdowns at a bad time, and usually a well-played game or a closely played game, and that's really what it usually comes down to. Is just a couple things right at the end.
Yeah, if I turn your attention back to your playing days and say 97 or 98, if a coach before the game says, "Hey, our defense is going to give up 17 points," how often are you winning?
Oh my gosh! And back in that day, we're winning. I think we're winning all of them. We had at the time broken the record for scoring in a season. And I think as a defense, when you have an offense that's very, very high powered like that, it does change kind of how you play. Because if you're playing with a lead quite a bit, you're going to be a lot more in nickel. You're going to be expecting passing because the team that you're playing against is behind and trying to catch up. You're going to play a little bit more bend but don't break, so you may give up more yardage because the only way a team can get back in the game quickly is through a big play, and big plays come, when you might roll the dice and blitz or do things like that. So it does change the way, a defense operates. And I think just the same way, right now with the games being as close as they have been, if the offense just isn't putting up a lot of points, it's going to change the defense as well, because opposing offenses are going to know that they need 1 or 2 good drives. They don't feel pressed. They don't feel like they, have to play out of their minds to put a ton of points on the board to win this foot race. So, it changes the game.
Yeah, well, let's turn to the offense because, last week you gave us some insight and you said, what these receivers need to do? They need to run some rub routes to get themselves open. And you know what? You must have known something because Norv Turner and receivers coach George Stewart did exactly that against Buffalo, and it worked great for Greg Jennings and Jarius Wright. But when you looked at the game film, Pete, why did Cordero Patterson still not get open?
That's a $1 million question. I think there were a couple routes for just toward the end when Teddy was scrambling, and then one in particular, he was really just kind of standing there. So there's something wrong there. Can't put a finger on it. Don't know what it is. It's awareness, a lot of it. When you look at this team and this defense, our offense, one receiver, our biggest offensive weapon right now is probably Cordero Patterson. So he's going to attract the most attention. He's going to track the best cornerback of the two. So there's a lot of obstacles in his way. And, you would hope that a guy this young in his career would be able to benefit from having a number one or somebody else next to him. But right now he just doesn't.
It leads me to a great question I always had was, with Patterson not being able to get open, we really don't have a number one receiver right now. And in your career, I mean, you had Chris Carter and Randy Moss as number one receivers, so you know that luxury. But if a team like the Vikings doesn't have a number one receiver, can you get by with a bunch of slot receivers? And if so, how do you do that?
Well, you can. I mean, not every team that's won a Super Bowl has had just a complete, enormous stable of, very, very good receivers. If you have a defense that's outstanding, I mean, you can make up for it in a lot of other aspects. And, football is really the last of the team sports where you need an entire team. And if you're deficient in some areas, or maybe not elite in some areas, other areas to make up for it. So, there have been teams that have had quarterbacks that are good, not great, but good. But they know their limitations. They're not turning the ball over. It's every team has a different personality. It's a situation where if you don't have a number one receiver, then you got to have a running game. You got to have a very, very good defense. And, we may have some of those things, but not all of them.
Minnesota visits the 1-5 Buccaneers this Sunday. What is the key to beating a Tampa 2 defense? And does Teddy have the right style to do it?
The Tampa 2 defense, I think the way it sits now, it's a lot of run after catch. You have to do that. Really that defense, and I played it back in 94, 95, when Tony Dungy was the defense coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, before it was even called that. It's a system, it's a defense that bodes well when you're going against a team that isn't patient or needs to get back into a football game. So if you build a big lead, meaning if Tampa gets out to a 2-3 score lead, and they can sit back and just play that defense. And it's a very, very tough one to beat deep. And it's you're going to get a lot of yardage, you're going to cover a lot of ground, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put points on the board when that defense is played well. The other key to that defense is you got to have your elite talent needs to be on that side of the football. You need to have a lot of elite players on that side of the ball.
And running that defense is a familiar face. It's Leslie Frazier. And he took a defense in Tampa that was kind of middle of the road last year in 2013. And now he's created the 32nd ranked defense in both yards allowed and points allowed. And it's really starting to look like the 2013 Viking defense. And I'm curious from your perspective, at what point will Frazier be asked to either alter his style or maybe even seek new employment?
That I don't know. I mean, Lovie Smith is also a defensive-minded coach. So that takes some of the heat off the coordinator. That's a tough situation for him. And, I don't know if they've identified the problems. That's really between coaches and management. I mean, the coaches, if they can identify the problem and speak to it, and management can buy into it and, how to correct it, this doesn't necessarily mean the end. But, it's too bad. It's tough. It's a tough business, and you come from Minnesota where you're the head coach and, you were not the coordinator. Now you are the coordinator, but you have a defensive head coach. It helps some of the, culpability, so to speak, but still, it's been a rough go of it. And the league's changing. I think these rule changes have finally come into play and have changed enough things where, the game is changing. It's so much more man-to-man. It's so much more challenging wide receivers. It's so much more blitzing. Defenses know that offenses are going to get big plays one way or the other, so you may as well roll the dice and try to get somebody on the ground before they throw it, because you just can't jam receivers. You can't do a whole bunch of things anymore. So the game, especially on that side of the ball, it's changing.
Well, the last question on Tampa is, obviously you're going down to the Tampa-St. Pete area. The key question that we want to know is, are you taking the Speedo for the beachwear action?
Yeah, well, I'm taking all of them. I got a little wardrobe. I got a bunch of. No, I laugh. It's gonna be nice to get down there and see some heat. I'm gonna get some heat. I'm gonna see my cousin who lives down there. He pitched in the major leagues for a number of years, and so it'll be good to see him. But the Vikings have never won at the new stadium. We've the last win that we've had was against Tampa Bay. In Tampa Bay was at the Big Sombrero outside. And so it's, I mean, that's a long time ago. You're looking at almost 20 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's time. There's no doubt. Well, as we turn away from the Vikings and the rest of the NFL, I'm curious, did you see the punt return by the Rams against the Seahawks this past weekend?
Yeah, I did, and I think it was brilliantly executed. And when you get I'm amazed because you could practice something like that all year and just not get the kick that you want. I think that they knew that there was a directional punting team. That if you know that a team is going to punt to one side or the other instead of down the middle, then you could set something like that up. But I think it was brilliant. I think special teams has changed as well because you don't see the specialists that much anymore in this league because aren't as many kickoff returns. There's a lot of less of a lot of different things, and you always try to look up for the football, and especially if it's if they call a directional kick one way, that's the way you go. I mean, it wasn't a miss hit. I think the football went right where it was supposed to go, but the guys were just looking at the return man instead of paying attention to where the football was going.
Yeah.
The thing too is you got to be careful looking up because you might get lit up. You got to keep your head on the swivel.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. I mean, it was a great play, but from a special teams coach perspective, how can he avoid that from happening, or can he?
Well, that's the thing is that at some point you have to have somebody responsible for everybody. And when you have a situation like that, depending on who they pull it from, I mean, normally if a gunner is one-on-one with somebody, they should beat him cleanly. And if that's the case, if they have two guys deep and they pull a gunner away, then you should have one of the guys on the outside be free, and your job is never let someone get behind you. Because teams could, you said the Music City Miracle, that kind of stuff. I mean, you can have someone go back and there could be a throwback, so that's their job. Now, if they're getting double teamed on both sides, then there's going to be somebody in the middle that has to be able to accommodate for that. I mean, these are just rules. These are just things that, it takes a while to learn. I mean, you would think on the surface that special teams is just running down the field like a maniac and trying to make a play. Well, there's really a lot of thinking involved and a lot of responsibilities that have to be played. And again, with these kids, with the teams getting younger and younger, if you don't have any experienced guys out there, things like that can happen.
Yeah, well, elsewhere, it looks like wide receiver Percy Harvin continues to keep the U.S. Moving Company in business as he changed addresses for the third time in just 18 months, becoming a member of the New York Jets now. With his problems, Pete, mixing with teammates and spoiling the chemistry of at least two teams and counting, is he becoming the Terrell Owens of the 2010s? A guy who's got elite talent, but he had the bad behavior outweighs the product he puts on the field?
Yeah, that's one of the things is that the old saying with football is when it comes to personnel and the players is what'll make you laugh will make you cry. I mean, the things that make Percy Harvin who he is on the field, and let me speak to that for a minute. And that he's one of the toughest wide receivers I'd seen. Not afraid of physical contact, not afraid of running people over. I mean, he was a very, very tough young man. But those same things that allow him to play that way and to be that way, they can hurt you off the field. And I think, one of those things is it's just as if he doesn't have the ability to keep to himself. I mean, certain things are true. And people go through this at work every day. You know what's going on. You know what the situation is. But at the same time, you have a filter saying, well, I'm not going to point this out and, in this group because it's going to offend somebody or it's not my position. As a player, it's not your position to be commenting on how everybody else is playing. Your job is to play the game. It's the coach's job to do that. And, he's just lacking that. And for some reason, he doesn't feel like, or he feels like he can have that kind of a opinion on things and at the same time voice those opinions. And, that part of it is unacceptable. That's what, makes him like quote unquote bad teammate, if you will. And unfortunately he's continuing to do those things. You just have to have that filter, so to speak, when you're among your teammates. You can't, it's not a player's job to be commenting on how the rest of the players are playing. Your job is to take care of yourself. And, he's obviously not doing that.
Well, and obviously he makes it difficult for offenses because he commands the ball so much. He begs for the ball so much, which ultimately is going to get him, double teamed. And to me, it's a little bit like, and certainly not the same distraction in the locker room, but, when you coached under Mike Tice, he had the Randy ratio that came out for a while. Yeah. And that was tough to fulfill because you put all the attention on Randy Moss. Is the same thing going to happen to Percy Harvin?
Yeah. I mean, as a talent, he's extremely unique. He can be a running back, a wide receiver. But I think once the game starts and you watch film, and that's what you kind of have to go back to. There are a lot of guys out there with big names, guys who at one time were dominant but are no longer. You have to judge how these guys are and who they are and what they are on film. One of the things for Percy was when he was on the field, he was dynamic and everything else, but he had a hard time staying on the field. And when teams watch the Jets, they're going to have 1 week or two of being able to use him as a surprise or, not knowing necessarily how they were going to be implementing him and where he's going to line up and those kinds of things. But if he doesn't stand out on film, then he won't command the attention. That's the real true test. And that is where guys know if you're playing well or not playing well. You may have a big name, but if you're not putting good game film on tape, then guys are not going to respect you like they used to, and coordinators won't either. They'll not necessarily go out of their way to cover Percy Harvin.
When we look at NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, he's got a tough decision to make, probably as early as the end of this week, because Ray Rice is seeking reinstatement. And I'm curious, from two positions, if you're the commissioner, what do you do? And if you're a GM and he is reinstated, would you take a chance on bringing this guy onto your team with all the media attention it's going to bring?
Yeah, there's two sides to that. I think the commissioner has to proceed with precedent in mind, meaning that what happened, what's gone on with Ray Rice, and has he been arrested? Has he been charged with anything? So the commissioner has to proceed that way because it could happen the other way. If it happened poorly, somebody could have a fake photo or make a fake video, and if by the time you figure out it's not legitimate, the player could be out of the league for 3-4 weeks, and that could change things entirely. So I think he touched on something that just may happen. He may get reinstated. Because to walk the rules and to walk the line is to say, innocent until proven guilty. We have a window where we can suspend people for a certain period of time. Once that's over, then what do you do? And he may have to reinstate him for that. Now, the team, I don't think the team will let him anywhere near the building. I just think that there'll be such, a public outcry, and there'll be so many people upset that he's back that there's no way that the Baltimore Ravens, I think, will let him back from the locker room. I just don't see it happen. I think ownership, they have that right. They have that ability to let anybody in or out of the building if they want, and they'll probably just turn him loose.
And based on that, given they've kind of turned their back on him, if you're a GM of any other team, would you pick him up?
I don't think so. I think it's one of those things where, the video's out there. People saw what happened, and, I just don't think that anyone or any team is going to want someone that does something like that to be on their team. So I think he's done. I think even if he is reinstated, even if he's able to come back, he won't.
Okay, well, as we close out our conversation tonight, we're adding one question a week that helps fans get into the mind of Pete Bercich. And this week, Pete, fans want to know this one thing. If we sneak into your house, we turn on your television set, what are the must things that we're going to find in your DVR right now?
Let's see. Really, I watch a lot of the American Heroes channel. I've been TiVoing a bunch of stuff that's on World War I. It's the 100-year anniversary of the beginning of World War I, and there have been a couple of very nice series put together. Apocalypse of World War I being one of them, the Great War being the other one. Mm-hmm. And then I think on the other side, on the scientific side, there's a series called How the Earth Was Made, and I TiVo that, and even though I've seen them all a bunch of times, I'll watch it one more time and delete it, and go from there. So I don't watch a ton of sports. I TiVo some English Premier League. Haven't been to a couple games over in England. I enjoy keeping up with it. It's a lot of fun. But that's it. I mean, not a ton in the way of sports, but mostly, those kinds of things. And for TV shows, I've got about 36 episodes of Walking Dead I got to catch up on, and that's it. I don't have time for anything else.
I don't know if you're like me, but it seemed like we used to be able to turn on the History Channel and get all that information on the wars. Now there's nothing but reality shows. We got to go somewhere else to get the history.
Yeah, I know. But that's a function of reality shows are so cheap to make and so easy to make that it doesn't cost these networks very much to make one. I mean, you could make one yourself, and if you just sell a little bit of advertising and get some viewership to make money on it. So it is what it is, and I get enough reality every single day. I don't need any more of it.
Yeah, I hear you, and I'm just happy to hear that you don't have things off the Lifetime channel and you're sitting down with a box of Kleenex, so that's good.
Yeah, I TiVo the Oprah network 24/7. When I just want to nest in and just relax.
It happens to all guys,
That's
you know that.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we bring the close to another edition of Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call. And we want to remind you to catch Pete's football thoughts on his website at PeteVFootball.com, or really follow him on Twitter because he tweets during and after Viking games to keep you up on top of the action. So until next week, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. So long, everyone.